Welcome, Dr. Sterling. We're thrilled to have you join us today as we celebrate ASN's diverse membership, and especially this month since February is Black History Month. To get started, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background as a Jamaican?
Sure, and it's great for me to be here. Very thrilled to hear about and to just be a part of ASN Spotlight on Black History Month. A little bit about myself. I am Jamaican and I really enjoy the richness of Black culture, which of course includes a variety of cultures such as African American, African, Caribbean culture, and many other parts of the world. I have been fortunate to be a part of such a rich heritage of Jamaican culture, and being able to be part of this experience for me is just really special.
So the contributions Black or African Americans have made to science haven't always been given the same level of attention as other aspects of popular culture. Is there a scholar you've admired who has given you inspiration in your career?
Sure, there have been many scholars who I have admired. I will point out two. The first is the work of Dr. Ben Carson as a neurosurgeon. I remember when I was a young college student and I had just graduated from undergrad and I was trying to figure out where to go next, what to study next. And I got the book Gifted Hands. And I remember reading through that book and just being so inspired by just his determination, his excellence, the way that he conducted himself in his work. And I think what inspired me about him as well is just sort of reading about his background, coming from a single parent home and having to sort of navigate a few challenges that he had in his growing up experience, and the fact that he was able to excel through all of this, that was really inspiring for me. The second person I'll mention is Dr. Katherine Johnson. She actually just died in February 2020, but Dr. Johnson was a brilliant mathematician and she was a pioneer in her field. She was actually one of a group of Black women who were recruited to NASA in the height of our Cold War. So in the 1960s, she was really instrumental in figuring out literally how we would get to space. So all the mathematic calculations that needed to be done, she was instrumental in doing those. And the stories even told of John Gray when he was about to go on that first mission. He said that if she didn't do the calculations, he was not going. That's how much her work was trusted. Now, similarly to her experience, just like we know, there are many Black scholars and scientists who did not necessarily receive credit for their work at that time. And even today, that's still a bit of a struggle. But thankfully, she was able to be recognized before her death a couple of years ago. And just the work that she was able to accomplish with her brilliance and her grit, being in a time when her work was not valued the way that it should have been, and maybe others were getting credit for her work when she should have gotten that credit. It was just really inspiring to see all that she overcame to get to where she needed to be.
Can you tell us more about your position at the Peanut Institute?
So my position at the Peanut Institute, I am the research director, and I was brought in here some years ago, it's been a while now, to sort of build up the research program that we have here at the Institute. So the Peanut Institute is a nonprofit organization that focuses on how peanut consumption affects human health. So we develop research, and then we also develop educational programs as well. So my job as the research director is to direct the nutrition research. So we send out a call for proposals each year. There's actually an active one that's happening right now. And then I'm also tasked with sort of making sure that we're looking at where the gaps in research may be at the present time and how peanuts and peanut butter can fit into a healthy lifestyle. I also manage our research library. I do a lot of speaking, both internationally and nationally. And one of the favorite parts of my position is translating complex scientific information into easy to understand forms for a variety of audiences. we know that within the scientific realm, sometimes we talk to scientists in scientific language very often. And as part of just being inclusive, I get a chance to really explain all those concepts to people who may not have the background that we do so that they can appreciate the science that we love as well.
So besides translating the scientific part of nutrition research, what other aspects of nutrition research do you foresee as being the most important right now?
I think that when it comes on to nutrition research, we've literally only been able to scratch the surface. And that's common in science in general, right? It's like peeling back an onion. You start with the first layer and then you're like, oh my goodness, there's more to go. So I need to keep going. And that's really the way that science feels very often. I think that the area, if I were to sort of condense this, the area that we will be looking at presently and in the future, just as a global society, is the ideal eating pattern for all people, regardless of background. And I think that within that heading, we include things like sustainable diet. We know that the Eat Lancet report that came out a few years ago talks about the fact that we're going to struggle to feed the world's population if we don't change our diets. Within that, we talk about how plant-based and plant-forward diets can contribute to sustainable diets. And within that heading, we also talk about health disparities. So feeding those who may not have access to all the resources that we do in developed countries. So I think that that heading is one that's going to be really important, not just today, but on a global scale in the future as well.
That's interesting. And you bring up health disparities. So this year's theme for Black History Month is Black Health and Wellness, also a fitting theme for ASN's members. What are some key components, approaches, or data gaps related to research designs that include diversity and inclusion?
So I think we've come a long way in terms of research focused on health disparities. It's an area that I'm personally passionate about. I think one area that there is some growth that's needed is that when we design interventions, we want to make sure that specifically within nutrition, we are representing the people that we are reaching out to. What I mean by this is that, for example, when we talk about healthy diets and what that looks like, okay, so you eat your fruits, your vegetables, your nuts, your whole grains, your beans, etc. And putting that within a healthy diet, sometimes we don't think about the term I like to call cultural palatability. In other words, taking the foods that are already prevalent within that culture and talking about ways to actually healthfully prepare those foods. Instead, often what we see is what we call dietary assimilation, where we are now trying to conform the diet and completely transform the diet to something that people are just not used to at all. Of course, there may be changes that need to happen in a person's diet. And of course, we can introduce new foods that people may not have seen before. However, we want to make sure that specifically within Black and Brown populations, the richness of flavor is there, the richness of cultural heritage is there, because it's such a big part of who we are, that we want to make sure that our interventions don't lose people because we're not taking advantage of this really important aspect of it.
You've been a member of ASN for a long time. How do you think ASN as an organization and individual members within ASN can support and encourage current Black scientists and future Black scientists to pursue careers in the field of nutrition?
I think that ASN is taking a really good step to first highlight and celebrate the accomplishments of Black scholars and Black scientists for Black History Month. And the key word there is celebrate. And I really appreciate that as definitely a first step for us as an organization. I think just even going back to the story that I talked about from my AP biology class, and I think about myself as a young person, not even knowing how interested I was in science, I think just having that experience for young scholars, so teenagers who are looking for where to go next in their careers. I think one way for ASN to expand is really to have outreach to those who may be younger, may not have the mentorship that many of us do to help us along in our careers, and expose them to science early on so that they could potentially discover their love for the subject. And who knows, they may become nutrition scientists in the future as well.
Do you have any advice that you would offer your younger self or other students or postdocs, especially those from underrepresented groups?
I would say that for young scholars in underrepresented groups, it's really important, two things. It's really important to find a support system. Very important for all of us, but especially for those of us who don't see ourselves represented very much. You're going to need mentors. You're going to need collaborators. You're going to need people who you can bounce ideas off and your experience off, because you need to be able to process what you're experiencing in a very safe space. And mentors who are years ahead of you can help to guide you along your journey as well. And as you find mentors, be sure to also give back. So be a mentor to someone else. That's really important for young scientists coming up. And then the other thing that I would say is, you're going to need to learn to silence the voices. And what I mean by that is, sometimes those voices are going to come from yourself, whether that's imposter syndrome that you may face at some point in your career. Learning to give yourself positive affirmations, that's important. And sometimes you may even need to silence the negative voices that are outside of you. Learning to speak up for the things that may make you uncomfortable, learning to speak up for the things that you may want to experience in your professional career, and doing that in a very tactful way, and then also affirming yourself in the process. I think those two things are really important.
Thank you, Dr. Sterling. Thank you for sharing your perspectives and your rich background and heritage, and helping us celebrate all of our diverse backgrounds at ASN in the field of nutrition.
Thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.